Hi, my name's Justin Hinton. I'm with Quail Forever and I work in the Southern Cross Timbers of Oklahoma as a wildlife biologist. I'm here to talk to you about predator control in the Southern Cross Timbers today and how everybody swears that predators are the problem instead of habitat management. I want to start with one of my favorite Aldo Leopold quotes. Conservation is a state of harmony between men and land. Harmony with land is like harmony with a friend. You cannot cherish his right hand and chop off his left. That is to say, you cannot love game and hate predators. You cannot conserve the waters and waste the ranges. You cannot build the forest and mine the farm. The land is one organism. So, whenever we dive into this, the first thing that we really want to do is describe all the different habitat usages of all of our different wildlife species. The first one that we're going to look at is raccoon habitat selection. From this study in Cross Timbers of Oklahoma, you can see that roughly 49% of the raccoons that they had documented were found in beaver swamps, where only 0.5 to 1% were actually found in prairies and grasslands. Even more shocking, only 2.9% were found in hardwood-only stands. Coyote habitat selection. Whenever we look at coyotes, they are very diverse in their habitat usages. They use almost every different habitat use on the landscape. Different things that we know that they dislike. For bobcats, this was pretty interesting because we all know that they're thicket lovers and they love their forest, but whenever we actually put it to a chart, it's a dramatic difference in the landscape that they utilize on a day-to-day basis. And so now we look at the raccoons, coyotes, and bobcats and all the different habitat types that they're using, and we compare that to the habitats that our quail, turkey, and other game species enjoy using. For a quail habitat selection, this is a great chart to actually analyze in the fact of the only areas that they really utilize on a day-to-day basis are basically as far away from the forested and wooded areas as possible, which is, as we just described, where their predators are. So they are actively seeking out areas that their predators are not, as long as they have usable space to do so. For our turkey nest selection, this was one of my favorite studies that was done in Tennessee under Craig Harper, but they tracked and monitored turkey nests across the state, ended up tracking 647 nests over 8 years, across 380 different private property owners and 4 WMAs. The interesting thing here is that the turkeys actually selected for the landscape cover that was the least available on the landscape. And what I mean is, hayfields and pastures made up 34% of the landscape. Mature hardwood canopy forests made up 38% of the landscape. The shrubland, fallow fields, and early successional areas only made up 7% of the landscape. But 46% of the nest occurred there. So 46% of all of those 647 nests occurred on 7% of the landscape. And 36% of all those nests succeeded. They actually had the highest poult survival compared to any of the other different landscapes. And from what we were just discussing with the predators side of things, that is an area that your raccoons, bobcats, and coyotes will not be. So as we dive into this, got to ask a question. If we are going to talk about predators' influence on a game species, we must acknowledge how habitat degradation has played its role. In a stable ecosystem with healthy habitat components, predator populations flow behind prey population trends. If prey populations go up or down, predator populations follow closely behind. However, what if spaces that were once suitable for our game species have now become more suitable for the predator populations? What if that same habitat change can supplement resources to predators in other ways? And are we witnessing what happens when a biome truly collapses? In the Southern Cross Timbers, we've seen a dramatic shift from our blackjack and post oak savannas into eastern red cedar and mixed hardwood forest. So in the left side of this graph, you can see most of our landscape was post oak and blackjack oak. On the right side of this graph, you can see a great diversity in tree species amongst our cross timbers. It's changed a lot and it's a little bit out of whack. So from right here, it's taken from the same study, you can see where our bottleneck is. So as we look at the different timber composition shifts across southern Oklahoma, we notice that there's a significant increased number of eastern red cedars within those forests. From right here at this single study, we noticed that 888 post oaks were in one forest alongside 296 eastern red cedars. That many eastern red cedars produced 1,210 saplings. Meanwhile, the post oaks only produced 23 saplings. In essence, this only means that your hardwood forests are not regenerating at a healthy rate, and these eastern red cedars are taking over the forest in a way that they will be the only species remaining. To piggyback off of that, these are images from our RAP tool, found publicly online, that show shrub and tree cover back in 1990, only 35 years ago, and our tree and shrub cover now. You can see a dramatic difference in the density of that brush. And at the same time, we have been losing our perennial forbs and grasses. Most of those are our native warm season grasses and our wildflowers, something that our quail, turkey, deer, pollinators all need. And this is a process that's actually called mesification. And by definition, it's an ecological shift from open and fire-dependent ecosystems to closed canopy woodlands that retain more moisture and shade. In essence, it's a landscape that's trying not to burn. So whenever mesification occurs, there's other things that actually come into play, like mosquitoes and ticks. Oklahoma State University has actually documented some of these changes. And in these eastern red cedar thickets, you will see a dramatic increase in tick-borne illnesses among those ticks. You will also see an increase in disease-carrying mosquitoes in those eastern red cedar forests. Now let's talk about the North American Breeding Bird Survey and look at the dramatic differences that our birds have been subject to. The eastern meadowlark has dramatically decreased across its range, specifically in southern Oklahoma. This is not very far from Ada. We've got Noble Ranch, we've got Mill Creek, and we've got Holdenville Ranch. So kind of just all around southern Oklahoma, and you can see the dramatic decline in the eastern meadowlark, right alongside the northern bobwhite quail. These routes were taken at the exact same 3 points, and the northern bobwhite quail is dramatically dropping at the same rate. This is because of usable space. This is the habitat degradation. And all these things together, the more disease, the less healthy woods, less grassland birds, we've seen dramatic turkey decline, and we've seen an abundance of predators across the land. That kind of describes a biome collapse. So let's talk about solutions to our predator problems. Should we go about predator management or should we go about habitat management? Which one's going to be more feasible for us and which one's going to be more sustainable for our future? The first study that comes to mind as we study this dynamic is a study that was done in Canada where they were trying to depopulate raccoons that had rabies, and the rabies was getting out of control. By doing this, they set up 3 different areas. One area in which they just trapped, collared, and released raccoons. The other one where they trapped and euthanized raccoons, and then another area where they trapped, vaccinated, and released the raccoons. This was done because they wanted to see how the raccoons would react under different management solutions. The more interesting note on this study is the fact that the neighboring raccoons did not move to the vacant landscape. They actually repopulated it through breeding. We'll get into what that dynamic is called in a little bit. So whenever we look at coyotes, they're a little bit different in the fact that they cover more ground. The more you trap, the more likely you are to actually encourage a new coyote to come into that area that you trapped. And whenever you don't, you'll never know what that new behavior is. This study here was actually documenting gene flow in coyotes to discuss that dynamic in a sense of like if you remove coyotes, more coyotes will come in, and they can document that change through the genetic gene flow. Through this, it says that they found evidence for compensatory immigration, but they also suggested that it was not completely responsible for the recovery of that population. They did not record larger litter sizes, so they weren't just having more pups out there and repopulating the area that way. But it does say that they started documenting coyotes that were breeding at a younger age. So the more that we try to manage these populations directly, the more likely it is that that population will rebound in a way that they will be able to keep their populations stable. So let's talk about a few different compensatory mechanisms. We've got immigration and reproduction, and both of them are driven by resource availability and usable space. Immigration is the movement between individuals from adjacent areas into an area where the population was reduced. This is what we see oftentimes with coyote populations. A neighboring population will make its way into the population that you depopulated. The compensatory reproduction, though, that's a biological phenomenon where populations increase their reproductive output in response to external pressures. We see that also happen in coyotes, but where we see this the most prevalent is probably in raccoons. So there's a lot of people that talk about seeing increased fawn numbers after being able to successfully trap a high number of coyotes on their property year in, year out. A study done over in Georgia wanted to see if this was actually a sustainable option. Throughout the study, though, they actually noticed that there's a couple years that they can trap and actually have a decrease in fawn recruitment, where they actually feel like they trapped a high percentage of the raccoons. They were intense in their trapping measures, and they actually had less fawns survive through winter. This just goes to show that our predator populations are not the sole reason that our prey populations act in the way that they do. But whenever we look at fawn survival through habitat measurements, we can see that the more total edge that you give a fawn during fawning season, the more likely it is to survive. Then we go, why is that? It's probably because the more vegetative structure, density, just the more diversity that we put onto the landscape in general adds to cover. And it's not always visual cover. It's not just obstruction. We also have this vegetation also serves as cover for olfactory-driven predators and their senses. So whenever we look at a place like this, in the background you see some overstory trees, some post oaks and some blackjack oaks in the background. In the foreground, you see a thicket of sand plums, a little bit lower in structure, but they're not too dense to shade out the grass underneath it. So what this does is adds vegetative structure from the ground all the way up. And what this will end up doing for a prey species that's bedding or nesting in an area like this is it actually traps their scent to their localized area and doesn't allow the drift of their scent out to an area where a predator will actually travel through. And so this actually is a sense of camouflage for your prey species while your predators are still out and about. This is actually what your turkeys are looking for to nest in. So now let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, is predators and their relationship to fire. There's a lot of great studies out there that actually document this. They are actually trying to document either turkeys or quail or deer, but they also ended up documenting the predator side of it as well because it's usually so shocking. As you can see from this study, armadillos and raccoons simply don't like to be around burnt areas. They will, in areas that have higher biodiversity, which means more diverse burning regimes through different habitat structures, and the distance from recent burned areas, they will tend to stay away. Now, bobcats and coyotes are pretty much the same dynamic. The more fire you put on the landscape and the more patchiness that you can add to that landscape through your habitat structure and that disturbance regime, the more likely you are to keep your predators off that land. All right, so this is where it actually gets pretty fun. This is a study that was summarizing the occurrence rates of predators in response to fire return intervals. The predators that they documented were hogs, foxes, raccoons, possums, and armadillos. Bobcats and coyotes were not detected enough to put data to their prevalence. That's good news in my opinion. They started burning an area and they couldn't even document bobcats and coyotes enough to put them on paper. But whenever we look at the reaction of these predators to the burning, especially, we'll zero in on the patch scale here, but if you go unburned for 20 years, every single predator that's documented on that, you will see it over 70%. That means that every single day there's a 70% chance at that predator being in that area. Now, if you do 7 burns in 20 years, which is about a 3-year return interval, putting fire to the land every 3 years, You're dropping that percentage down to less than 20%. That's pretty significant. Now, whenever you put 10 burns on that unit in 20 years for a 2-year return interval, you get less than 10% of all of those predators on that land any given day. And I've got to ask the question, but can trapping do that? I think if our trapping efforts did that, we'd be very, very happy. This study breaks down how quail respond to fire. So we already talked about how predators don't like fire. So let's talk about how quail like fire. In areas where there were 0 burn interval, that was 66% of the land, only 21% of the nests were found there. And that's only a quarter of a nest per acre. For a burn interval of 1 year after fire, 23% of the landscape had 60% of their quail nests. That's over 2 nests per acre. Now, whenever you combine that with what we just discussed, every other year putting fire to the land would drop your predator influence down to less than prevalence down to less than 10% on your property, and then you can put over 2 nests per acre of quail on the same type of habitat structure. That's a pretty significant change. Oh, well, coyotes are still really diverse and they eat just about everything, right? Well, this study was done in a quail habitat area and they documented just what coyotes are eating. And what they found was that they are not eating quail. More importantly, they're not really eating that many deer either, not compared to how many mice they eat. That is true for wet and dry years. When we choose to be direct and intentional with our habitat management practices, we can create more usable space for prey species like bobwhite quail and eastern wild turkey, provide higher quality nutrition and greatly enhance fawn cover for our deer populations, create less usable space for predators like coyotes, bobcats, and especially raccoons. This mitigates compensatory reproduction and immigration by reducing the success rate of acquiring the resources that make the mechanisms function and increasing the predator's effort to survive within a given space. Have a larger impact on a predator's influence on its prey than by trapping alone. Consolidate predators into localized usable areas to make trapping efforts longer lived and supplement the habitat management effort. Other benefits that you can count on are increased usable space and resources for pollinators, improved soil health and water quality, curb the grassland bird decline, and you restore ecological function. Aldo Leopold once said that the central thesis of game management is this: game can be restored by the creative use of the same tools which have destroyed it: the axe, plow, cow, fire, and gun. Now replace the word game with land. These are actually the results from my family's land over near Gertie, Oklahoma. Back in 2021, my family had purchased land over in Gertie, Oklahoma, where we had actively been managing it for wildlife recreation purposes. This is the canvas in which we were working on. You can see there's a lot of wooded areas, very little open space. Hadn't been burned in a while, and there was a lot of eastern red cedars. As you can see, there's nothing but shade and leaf litter in our woodlands. And like I said, our cedars had gotten out of control. In 2022, we did our first prescribed burn, knocking back much of our eastern red cedars, at least the ones in the open areas. Didn't really touch much of our mature cedars. Cleaned up some of our leaf litter, but after so many years of leaf litter, it might have gotten half of it. This was the result after our first burn. We really got it hot in there. We really got it, about as good a condition for our first burn on there as we possibly could. That was the first time that we even saw turkeys in our area. Many of our neighbors at that time were saying that they hadn't seen turkeys in a couple years, and the ones that they had seen, there was just not very many of them hanging around. This was about 2 or 3 weeks after that first burn. We had this tom strutting around in the ash. In 2023, though, after we had been trapping for a year or two, started to realize a few things from our trends and data that I had been collecting. Our raccoon sizes had decreased. Our possums, at least our occurrence in possums, actually increased. Number of raccoons trapped remained similar, and actually one year it increased. Our neighbors increased baiting and feeding around the perimeters of our property. The vast majority of raccoons trapped during the first 10 days. About 75 to 85% of those were trapped in the first 10 days. Effort, intensity, and season of trapping remained the same. Third summer without turkey poults and much less quail. It did not take long to realize I was not only losing money and time, but I was not making a difference. Not even a dent. That wasn't even including the nights spent trying to hunt feral hogs or coyotes. The question became, without trapping, what can I do through habitat management and manipulation with the same amount of time and effort that will positively influence game species production while diminishing the predator's success to hunt and or reproduce? The next year, I quadrupled my time that I spent managing the actual timber. So in 2023, got myself my Stihl chainsaw and we went to work. You can see just the dramatic difference that this one little patch of cedars had created. Then we moved into the bigger cedars along our woodland edges, clearing out big old legacy oaks that had probably not seen sunlight and space for close to a century. 2024, the turkeys responded. They hung out near our edges where we removed those cedars most of the year. And as you can see here, it wasn't just a couple in an area that did not see flocks over 5 or 6 per flock. For a while, we are now seeing flocks of over 20. In 2024, that was all the ammo that I needed to start cutting more trees and putting more fire on the ground. A lot of timber burning, got a lot of leaf litter out, but we're always hammering our small cedars in our open spaces. That was also the first year that my oldest daughter got out on a burn with me. As you can see, she can be pretty bossy. But in 2025, something special happened for me. I got in some contact with some eastern red cedar loggers that actually wanted to come out to our place and take as many eastern red cedars as they possibly could. They didn't want me to pay them. They wanted to pay me for my timber, for my problem. And I let them. And they came in and they got as many eastern red cedars as they possibly could. And our woodlands are healthier for it, and they are very thankful. As you can see right here, that middle picture is actually a bunch of big blue stem coming through in an area that had not seen sunlight for over 100 years based on satellite imagery. And we've got vegetative growth in areas that used to not be anything but leaf litter. We still kept our oaks. We wanted our problem child to be gone though. This was my pride and joy though. About 3 months after the logging was completed, we started getting blooms of flowers, of wrastling wildflowers up in our woodlands that were nothing but leaf litter. We've got bunch grasses out in areas that were nothing but eastern red cedar. And we got our first ever turkey hen, to nest successfully on our property. All of us biologists will always say diversity is king. So did somebody ask about diversity in our warbs after the logging process was completed? This is the type of plant community that we need to produce if we care about producing more bobwhite quail, healthier deer herds, producing more turkey poults, and even for people wanting to save the monarchs. My favorite Aldo Leopold quote is this: "We abuse land because we see it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." Thank you everyone for your time today. I hope y'all enjoyed learning a little bit about predator control without all the trapping effort. If you have any other questions or anything, please reach out.